Please be aware that the event will be recorded and shared following the event. For everyone we are meeting for the very first time tonight or today, based on your local time, welcome. For those of you with whom we have reeled back in, thank you so much for coming. At Jalapeno, our vision is to build a world where individuals and companies can reach their full potential. To help our clients in this vision, we are committed to providing them with all the services and tools you need to reach this full potential and work towards creating a fulfilling and meaningful life at workplace. We do this by leveraging technology and psychology to help our clients develop essential skills while creating sustainable and humanized work environments. To fulfill our mission, we have a team of experts in counseling, consulting, coaching, training, and counseling that leverage our proprietary software to unlock the team's potential. We appreciate you taking time off your busy schedules to join us here today. Let's talk about what we have planned for you. For the first few minutes, I will be talking about some jalapeno event rules, and then our speaker, Dr. Steve Ingham, will talk about what is high performance for business, followed by a question and answer session with the moderation of Emilia. Finally, for the last few minutes before concluding the session, there is a little surprise planned for our community, so stay tuned. We hope that you find this spicy hotline event that we have lined up for you to be fruitful and engaging. Before we share our secret sauce for high performance team, what's a jalapeno spicy event without a couple of rules? I promise they won't be hard to follow. 4 points that we would like to highlight. Firstly, this is a safe space. You don't have to show your face, your name, or mention your company name if you would prefer not to. If you would like to join the conversation, please add your thoughts, your feedback to the chat or message me privately. We will do the best to answer you. Everyone here is for a reason. Listen to understand, not to judge. Our intention during these discussions is not to come to a consensus, but to share different perspectives. No interruptions. No one loves being cut off. Please don't interrupt our speakers. Instead, please use the Zoom icons to raise your hand. On your main screen, you can see the participants icon with an arrow pointing upwards. If you click on that, you can see raise your hand option. Finally, mute your audio. Make sure to mute your audio until you're ready to speak. Doing this cuts down background noise, pulling focus away from the speaker. Okay, I think you have heard enough from me. To kick off this event, I will now pass my torch over to our senior consultant, Emilia Chan, who will be the moderator for the rest of the event for us. Emilia is a founder of Higher Options Consulting and our senior consultant at Jalapeno Employee Engagement. She has developed her professional expertise in a variety of industries, including retail, high tech, logistics, oil, and gas. Her diverse background and her association with small to medium sized firms really complement her high energy, flexibility, and entrepreneurial spirit. Stage over to you, Emilia.
Thanks. Hi, and welcome everyone. Over the next 45 minutes, we will be talking about high performance. Whether that high performance is at an individual level or a team level, it's something that we all strive for and always have room for improvement in. Managing in business today is challenging. The speed of change is nonstop and requires continuous evolution to stay competitive. Teamwork matters to your business success because it creates positive relationships that support trust, productivity, and innovation. A successful team requires solid leadership, communication, and access to resources, but it hinges on these coming together through people. Apathy, disengagement, and burnout is real. COVID-19 has exacerbated things and really tested our resilience. With all the pressures we've been experiencing within and around us, we may not even know what high performance looks like anymore. We could use a reset and perhaps take a fresh look. If we better understand performance dynamics, we will be able to apply the right energies and resources to achieve success. By the end of this event, you will be able to recognize how pressure changes team function, understand the characteristics of low performing and high performing teams, and explore strategies that will enable better results for your team. We are very honored to have Dr. Steve Ingham as our guest speaker to share his extensive knowledge and experience with us. Dr. Steve Ingham is steeped in high performance and has been integral to the development of Britain into an Olympic superpower. He has provided support to over 1,000 athletes, of which over 200 have achieved world or Olympic medal success, including some of the world's greatest athletes, such as Dame Jessica Ennis Hill, Sir Steve Redgrave, and Sir Matthew Pinsent. Steve has coached Kelly Sotherton's running for heptathlon and to 4x400 meter Olympic medal winning success. Steve has gained high performance insight working at the British Olympic Association from 1998 to 2004, where he was senior sports physiologist and sports science manager, and at the English Institute of Sport from 2004 to 2016, where he was head of physiology and latterly the director of science and technical development, leading a team of 200 scientists in support of Team GB and Paralympic GB. Steve holds a BSc, PhD, and is a fellow of the British Association of Sport and Exercise Sciences. Steve is the author of the best-selling How to Support a Champion, The Art of Applying Science to the Elite Athlete, discussing and inspiring the importance of learning and adapting to reach our maximum potential. Steve established Supporting Champions with the ambition of bringing performance know-how to help people achieve their goals. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Steve Ingham. And over to you, Steve.
Wonderful. Well, let me just share my slides. Thank you so much for that introduction, Emilia, and thank you to Samin for hosting me. I'm feeling spicy already. I love the ethic and the team focus that you have in your organization. It's a delight to connect with you tonight. Wherever you are in the world, I think that's I hope you're well and safe. That's my first sentiment. Let's start with that point before we then start thinking about thriving and pushing onward. Can I get a thumbs up from the team there that you can see my slides okay? Fantastic. Okay, so I'm really excited to share with you some ideas and some thoughts that I've gathered from the last 25 years of working in the world of high performance. And I will say this from the outset, that sport is not a panacea. Sport cannot just cut and paste into all sorts of different environments. So I'm really keen to hear what your questions are in the Q&A session. What's your challenge? What's the context that you're experiencing right now? But sport does expose human function. Sport endeavor certainly gives you the feedback, and it will let you know where you stand at the end. And so if there is some gain to be had, and this is one of the big things that we discovered on the journey through high performance, if there's gain to be had from the team, how the team works, then there's competitive advantage. So as Emilia outlined, my background is a scientist, a performance scientist. So I would literally collect blood, sweat, and tears, and I'd analyze them. I'd give the athletes some advice about how they might need to train, or the mindset that they needed to apply. 200 of the athletes that I've had the privilege and honor of working with have stepped onto an Olympic or world podium. So they've become Olympic medalists. But I'm a scientist in support of others. So here's another disclaimer. I don't have a gold medal to show you at the end. What I'm not going to do is say, look, it all must be true because I've won a medal, and therefore my journey to the success of high performance myself is the story to be told. My role is in support of other people to excellence, to high performance. As a scientist, I looked for everything that might allow me to be Olympic 100-meter champion, and I tried everything. But I did find that one thing you have to be is you have to make sure that you choose your parents really carefully, and I forgot to do that. So there's the disclaimer. So my expertise is in support of other people. Let me show you a couple of people just to get your spice on tonight. Give you a couple of people that chose their parents really carefully. So this is Hussein Razazadeh. He can lift over his head 263.5 kilos. That's 581 pounds. He can lift that over his head in under 10 seconds. Now, I can already sense the vibe on the Zoom, and you're thinking, sounds a lot. I'm not quite sure what that equates to. So let me give you the internationally standardized unit of weight, and that's white goods. So that's equivalent to a double toaster, 2 tumble dryers, and 2 of those American style fridges. So it's potentially quite handy if you've got removals or if you're moving house. So this is the sort of specimen, the sort of person that we get to work with in high performance. This is a chap called Jonathan Edwards, who is the triple jump world record. So hop, step, and a jump. So that's 18 meters 29, 60 foot exactly. That's equivalent to not just one of these Ford hatchback cars, but 4 1/4 of those hatchback cars. These are the sorts of people that we get to work with. This is Chris Hoy, one of our sprint cyclists, our best athletes in Britain, and he can generate off the start line of a cycling event 2,500 watts. Doesn't sound very much, does it? 2,500 watts. If we're actually generating that amount of electricity, if you find a way of plugging him in, it could power your house for 4 hours, which could be handy, could be good. So one of the things that we specialize in high performance is looking for the edge. And so this is Chris in the laboratory, and we're optimizing his saddle position. Why am I telling you this? Because we can get 5 watts more out if we do some testing. And we understand 5 watts more. 5 watts doesn't sound very much when he's already generating 2,500, but it's enough to reverse the outcome of that race. So 5 watts difference would have meant losing the gold versus winning the gold. Now, some of you might be familiar with a term that's thrown around in high performance called marginal gains, which has become famous around the world, which is associated with trying to gather up as many little things that you think might be relevant to performance, and they'll all add up and ultimately will improve performance. It's sort of a little bit distracting as a concept, because what you end up needing to be is an expert project manager, where you're project managing everything that's going on. Perhaps one of a healthier perspective that you might be thinking about, and certainly when our attention is in demand, certainly under these conditions where it's very volatile, it's uncertain, what's the smallest change that you could make, perhaps even the least effort, that could make the biggest difference? And so I want you to bookmark that thought as I just share with you a little story about sustaining success and thinking about what the smallest change might be in your world that could make a big difference. The sorts of athletes that we work with, this is Jessica Ennis Hill. For those of you who are not from Britain, Jessica Ennis Hill was the face of the Olympics in 2012. Just to put that into context, Jess was painted. This was a mural of her that greeted every athlete, every coach, every official, and every journalist and every spectator to the London Olympics. So the pressure on Jess was huge. Not only the face of the games, huge expectations. We have to cope with how we as a team, in support of someone like Jess, Team Ennis was what I was part of, that we have to absorb the pressure. We have to know that our bodies and our minds change under pressure. And we've got to make sure that we acclimatize to that pressure so that we know that we're able to deliver in the right way at the right time for someone like Jess. The dynamics between the coach, listening into the vibe between the coach and the athlete. How's it going today? Tuning into not only how they're performing on the track, but also the emotions. Are they stressed? Are they tired? Are they fatigued? Should we push at this project? Should we back off? And this is the cut and thrust of working in a high performance team. This is me with Jess and her coach, Tony, talking through different types of sessions, different ways in which we might approach peaking for the Olympics. So one of the, let me just rewind a little bit and share with you some of the journey towards this point and what informed a lot of our thinking along the way. So this is Steve Redgrave on the left, and this is Matthew Pinson on the right. They're Olympic gold medalists. Steve was winning his 4th gold medal, and that Matthew was winning his 2nd gold medal at the 1996 Atlanta Games. Just a reminder, they won the gold medal. Not that you can tell from their faces. I'm sure they were delighted, but it was quite hot. Now, these were quite intense characters because they were the only gold medal that Britain won at the 1996 Olympics. At that point, the whole system started to drive forward investment, infrastructure, allowing coaches and athletes and scientists like myself to work. Now, one of the ideas that was hatched in the moments after the Atlanta Games was to host the Games in London, and lots of politicians and clever strategists got together and advertised that London would be a great place to host the Games. Spoiler alert, we got the Games. So this is how an Olympic champion celebrates that moment when the Olympics is announced. This is how the politicians celebrate. This in the middle was Ken Livingstone. He's the mayor of London, and he's probably thinking, oh, I've got to do that. And you know what? Actually, that's how it felt, being awarded the Olympics on our shores. We've got the Games, and it felt incredible in that moment. And then you go, oh, we've got the Games. Ooh. And there's a sense of realism that suddenly punches. Now, there's no real difference in the events. It's still 100 meters is 100 meters. We don't go to Sydney. We don't go to Beijing. We don't go to Athens, these luxurious places. We go to Stratford in the East End of London. And the big difference, though, is hope is very different. We hope that we get this right. We hope we don't mess this up for all the people that are connected and embedded into this mission. The world's eyes are looking upon us, and we want to deliver. The families are all connected so much more because it's close. The media whip the whole thing, and that all boils down to a change in internal and external expectations. We feel it ourselves, and it's imposed upon ourselves. Now, I could tell you all about the pursuit of the London Olympics, how it felt actually going towards the London Games. It was amazing. Some of you, I'm sure, watched it. It's when Britain used to like each other. It's when Andy Murray, the tennis player, was winning things. It's when we could all socially connect with each other. I want to tell you a little bit about after the Olympics, because I think that potentially could be more relevant to sustaining success going forward. It's not just about the peaks, it's about maintaining your performance too. So to put this into context, at the London Olympics, Team GB, the team that I led the science operation for, won 65 Olympic medals, 120 Paralympic medals. And we all summited our Everest and took a big breath in and went, wow, that was incredible. It was such a high. And then we go, right, now we're down. Now there's a big lull. And you experience a lull after any big high. And we always ready our teams for this. Now, what happens normally after you host an Olympics is that you reset the medal expectations. They're about 10 to 15% lower. Not our government. No, they asked for more. So I don't know how familiar this is, asking for more with the same resources, actually a little bit less. 66 Olympic medals, 121 Paralympic medals was the expectation. This is our goal. This is our target. And I looked around and said, we can't do that. We can't do that. No nation's ever done that before. I looked around at my team, the 250 scientists, and they all said, no, that can't be done. And so the whole team is experiencing fear, threat, and resistance to this particular goal. And so along the way, in pursuit of the London Olympics, the one before was Beijing. This was when we actually had a real step change in our mentality about our teams. We were focused on aerodynamics, training regimes, psychological skills for the athlete. And then we turned around and said, well, actually, you know what? We expect so much of them. they should expect the best from us. How about if we got on a mission to establish high performance teams so that they had the best resource around them? I want to share with you a little study that might illustrate this particular concept. So this is cyclists in a laboratory, and they've got to exercise at a fixed power output, a certain percentage of what they're capable of, and they've got to hang on for as long as they can. The test is called a time to exhaustion, and it's as horrible as it sounds, quite frankly. It lasts about 20 minutes. Okay, so they're given different conditions. So whilst they're cycling away, these green dots appear on the screen, and they've got to follow those dots, then they disappear, and a white cross, white plus sign, appears in the middle. And I'm going to show you the video that these cyclists were shown. So in the chat box, what do you see? What do you see? White flash, designs, flashing pattern. Thank you for that. So you should see a pattern playing. Now, there's a subconscious aspect to this. So as the video is playing, another image appears just before that pattern emerges. And this study was priming the athletes subconsciously. They're exposing them to certain types of stimuli. I'm going to show you the video, but slowed down. Right, in the chat box, what do you see now? A human face. This guy. Faces. Okay, fantastic. Okay, right. So here was the study. Endurance cyclists working away. Under one condition, they're exposed to happy stimuli, happy faces. Under another condition, sad faces. Remember, this is subconscious. So they weren't aware of it during the test, and they weren't aware afterwards until the experimenters showed them and told them what was going on. This is the difference. The happy stimuli versus the sad. Happy were able to persist for longer. They found it easier. They found the journey easier. Sad found it more effortful. And this isn't about us necessarily just putting on a face and a facade. This is about us thinking about, how do we turn up every day? What's our focus so that potentially we can perform when it matters, when we're connecting with our team, when the push comes to shove? And we thought, actually, you know what, we're probably turning up at the track, and actually meaning that athletes are going slower because of how we behave. That got us really fascinated about the qualities of high performance teams. And so we did a big piece of work looking at the trends over time of those teams that succeed. They outstrip expectations versus the ones that don't perform to expectations. And I share with you the qualities and characteristics of teams. So first of all, we'll go with the not so good. This is the underperforming team. The first quality that we noticed was that the team moved apart under challenge and under pressure. The bonds between them fragmented. And so for us, it's big competition time. That's when the heat is on, and that is when teams got found out. So you might be going along all very nicely and comfortably, but when the pressure comes on, when the challenge comes on, the bonds get tested, and for an underperforming team, it weakens. There was a high level of blame. So you had the finger pointing, it was your fault. And you also had the inverse of blame, which was, it wasn't my fault, which basically means it was your lot fault. Those poor behaviors were accepted. So the leaders and the managers, when poor behaviors were demonstrated, they turned a blind eye, or they stepped forward. They didn't actually manage those particular behaviors. There was a distinctive lack of trust in the team. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. Lack of norms, psychological norms. So the principles and standards of the group, when we asked them, what are the norms in the group? What rules do you live by? They said, we don't know. And low levels of empathy. And just to put this into context, I'm a scientist. I'm thinking, I want to focus on the edge, the innovation, the bits that are really shiny in Gizmo. And now I'm thinking, you know what, if I don't reset and go back to some really deep core human function aspects, then I'm going to leave performance on the table. So now I'm thinking, what's the science of us developing high levels of empathy? So we called these corrosive behaviors, ones that erode bonds within the team. This is a picture of Brazilian footballer Neymar. I'm sure he's a lovely chap, but he doesn't demonstrate high performance behaviors on a pitch. You can see him there. The body language is he's blaming the opposition or the referee or the ball or the grass. I'm not quite sure. He's blaming. There's a blame behavior. Okay, so the teams that actually perform, they do the opposite. They pull tight under pressure. It's a bonding. It's a strengthening of those bonds under pressure. There's high levels of trust, which was marked by a spontaneous bringing of others into the loop when you didn't need to. There's high levels of collective accountability. So you heard things like we won or we lost. They were in it together. A strong sense of norms. Now, there was two distinctive aspects here, and I'll come back to this in my final thoughts. You can either let it spontaneously arise, the norms. You can just see if they get there eventually. Most of the teams actually worked at it, and they spoke about it, had the conversation. What are the norms and the principles that we're going to live by? There's high levels of psychological safety. Now, this is a concept that has got a lot of interest recently. And this is about, I understand that I'm able to take a risk without it coming back to bite me. And so that comes as much down to role clarity, understanding what your purpose is, but also from the leadership. And high levels of empathy. When we said, what do you know about each other? They talked about the times that they invested in understanding and appreciating each other's perspectives, as well as understanding that someone was into motorbikes or wine or whatever it might be. Now, here's an interesting picture. This is a positive picture of the England football team, which is an unusual thing to say, actually. So this was the World Cup, last World Cup, and this was the quarterfinal against Sweden. And the black chap at the back, he has just headed a goal. His name is Dele Alli. He's headed a goal that was crossed over by another guy called Kieran Trippier. He's getting the hug and the congratulations. Now, Harry Kane is the one that you can see shouting. He's got the green armband and he's pointing. He's the captain. He's the leader. He's the one that they're looking to. He is pointing, not to blame, not to set up the next move, but he's passing the praise on to Kieran Trippier, who crossed the ball. Now, we don't have the picture, but if we could, we'd want to see Kieran Trippier then passing the praise on to the person who got him the ball. And this is a hallmark, distinctive aspect of a high-performance team, distributing the praise. Post Beijing, the 2008 games, before we went to London, we had this big feedback from athletes and coaches. We can't work with your teams, the science teams. We need better support. And so we went on a mission finding out, what does it take for those that go into space and these peak maneuvers, the special services that do these peak maneuvers? What are the team characteristics? But we also spent time with ambulance workers that have to perform minute and day and hour, and also environments like air traffic control. Raise your hand or put it in the chat box if you like your air traffic controller to be a high performer. I'm all for that. So we wanted to find the peak and the everyday performers, and we found that the same characteristics came out. These are the characteristics of high performance teams. Now, post London, then rebooting the team, fear, threat, and resistance. Our focus wasn't just on what are we going to do, it's how are we going to work. And we focused on leaders first. Leadership being not because it was a hierarchical thing, not because you're paid the most, so you're going to get the development first. It wasn't a hierarchical thing. Actually, it was in a different way. We put the pressure on the leaders because our view was it would be the first thing that a team could do to say, I'm not doing it because you're not doing it. High performance behaviors, well, if you're not going to represent those and role model those behaviors, then we're not going to do it. So we wanted to work with the leaders first. And we asked the leaders to do 4 things that were summarized in this program called LEAP. The first L, the L is to listen. To listen to every person that's under your command and your management. Not just, okay, you've got half an hour, get it off your chest. What's the problem? Go on then. This is about active listening, hearing, completely free of distractions, summarizing back so that the person recognizes that they have been heard. This is the same vibe that we would pick up working with an athlete and a coach, listening and tuning into what's the vibe today. It's the same skill that we borrowed from ambulance workers who invest in active listening so that they're better able to make clinical decisions. The E is to engage. So those are your thoughts. Now what? What are your ideas? What do you think? And so much good ideas came out. But this is the same as when we were working with an athlete. You don't just say, do this, do that. You say, what do you think? What's your ideas? And this is the same as air traffic controllers, where they take them off task and they get them working with strategy. And when they go back to performing their maneuvers of positioning aeroplanes around on a screen, they perform at a higher level, lower levels of error. And the A was to activate. So those are your thoughts, those are your concerns, those are your ideas. So what? Now what? What could you take ownership for? Where does this sit into the priority? What resources would you need? And activating people so that they had some ownership of the strategy and ideas going forward. This is the same as working with an athlete. You don't look for an athlete to phone you up from within the Olympic stadium. You want them to own it. It's their strategy, not yours. And this is the strategy that we took from the special services. They have got to be able to make decisions close to the action. And so giving them ownership and decision-making control. And the P was purpose. So we asked people, what are you here to do? And we'd often hear people saying, well, I'm here to make the bikes go fast, or I'm here to improve nutrition. And we say, well, what's that to do? Well, okay, well, it's hopefully to allow the athlete to fuel, to go faster so that they can give their best. To do what? Well, hopefully to win a gold medal and hopefully achieve their dreams. To do what? And we'd keep going. And at that final level, to do what? We heard people talking about, I think my work is aligned to the athletes achieving or giving their best so that it gives pride to a society. And when we got to that shared purpose piece, then we had a diffusion of the tension, the fears and the threats. And so this is one example of a real slice of us just changing gear and considering our people first before we're talking about projects and plans. Now, this wasn't the only thing that we did in the pursuit of becoming the first nation to win more medals after hosting, but we were the first nation in both the Olympics and the Paralympics. But undoubtedly, it enabled us to better address some of the things that we were going to work through, the ideas, the challenging conversations, the innovations that were unearthed along the way. So a couple of closing thoughts then, just to provoke your thinking as we finish, and some questions. Human performance, if you're thinking about high performance, you're thinking about human performance, it puts humans first. And that's not just treating them like machines, like computers, that you put something in and something comes out. We have to be cognizant and understanding of human emotions, attention, cognitive load, rest and recovery, fatigue. If we don't, then we're going to leave performance on the table. Excellence exists between you as much as within you. And I think it's all very easy for us to think, how am I doing? What am I focused? How am I judged? Actually, we need to be thinking much more about the dynamics between us, because high performance isn't just about an outcome, the glory and the accolades. It's about doing what you can to improve the dynamics between you, because the dynamics is where the gold is. High performance can arise spontaneously. It can just exist, and we pop up, and we find teams all the time where we just go, that was great. What happened? I don't know. So unexplained winning is a bit of a sin in high performance. If you can create those conditions for it to arise, then you're being much more intentional about increasing the probability of success. I've got a final video for you to remind you of that question. What might be the smallest change that could be the biggest difference? So we've got a video here, and this is I want you to keep an eye on the cyclist in yellow who makes one small change that makes a big difference. So that's one thing. But I also want you to keep an eye out for the motorcyclist who is in support. Now, in fairness, the small thing is quite brave, especially if it hits a pothole. All right, so I want you to keep an eye out for the motorcyclist and think about how you might be able to support someone else to making a change. He doesn't even need to do that. He's got a motorbike. In fairness, getting back on the bike is just as impressive. What small change could you potentially make that could make a big difference? But also, if you spot someone else making a brave change, maybe your support could be the smallest thing that you could do to create some momentum. Thank you so much for your attention. I'd be so delighted to have a chat and a conversation about your challenges, what you're working on, and thank you.
Thank you, Steve. That was really, really, really cool. Some of the things that you've experienced and what you bring is very inspiring, and I think it's in as much as talking about Olympics and such incredible athletes. You've made it very relatable, and I think all of us in some way, and hopefully today, will be inspired with something and can take away from some of this. I'm curious, could you give us an idea? We'll definitely see if we can also present some of the questions that the audience is going to bring up as well. But I'm wondering, could you give us an idea what the overall steps look like when you first start working with a team or an individual, to give people a sort of an idea what that process might look like?
It's a great question, and one that when I reflect back of thinking of walking in the room for the first time and thinking, this is going to be different from now on. Because previously we would used to run meetings or development sessions and we just focus on what are we going to be doing? What was the work? What was the data? What was the feedback? As opposed to how are we doing this? And you had a number of poor behaviors in the room, someone at the back with their arms crossed who's not interested, or some of those meeting corrosive behaviors where you get somebody not saying anything, but they're going, what are they going on about? And I remember the moment where I'm in the room and thinking, this is it. This is the moment where I've got to put a stop to it. And my heart rate was going high. And I thought, I've got to call it out. Now, it's not that I wouldn't recommend it for everybody. It could be that you take somebody aside and say, this is the standard that I'm now expecting, particularly the people that are really influential in a team, or the ones that can change the meeting dynamic on a sixpence. When they're in a bad mood or they're having a bad day, everybody else has a bad day. But I just tackled it and said, look, this is a behavior that I can't accept. I really want the most positive, forward-thinking team possible. And that doesn't mean pulling our punches. We've got to have challenging conversations. Sometimes when you go into a team and everyone's just happy and lovely and comfortable, it's often a little bit stagnant. They're not really having the difficult conversations. And so finding a way to be brave and positive when you're able to call a question out or a challenge.
Okay, let's take. That's a really good point, and I'm glad that you bring that up about calling it out, because I feel like people sometimes feel hesitant to do that, especially if they feel like, well, I'm not necessarily in a position of power, or in a position of influence. So it is part of that leadership, individual or greater than that. Um, Let me bring a question out that one of our audience members is asking. And the question is, what is one of the most common psychological limitation or a drawback from within the athlete? What is
Well,
some of the things that they're, I guess, they struggle with? If
okay,
I'm
well,
asking the question properly.
yeah, well, this is an interesting concept of being able to perform in a big arena under pressure. But there are plenty. But one of the factors that I think is perhaps most interesting is that when I first started working with high performers, and you've got Olympic champions, and they're often much bigger than me, and taller and more muscular and more powerful, so they could swap me out the way if they needed to. I went into that environment away at training camps, and they're working hard, and I'm looking around thinking, where's the confidence? Where is it? I thought they would all be high-fiving each other and woohoo, we're going to do this, we're going to smash this. And I was quite surprised to hear, I'm not good enough, I'm worried, I'm concerned. And as a scientist, for example, I was measuring a lot of what they were doing, and they were constantly asking me for feedback as to, was I good enough? And so in support of athletes, you have to boost confidence. And that is critical for you to perform a given task. So this is something from a psychological point of view that's called self-efficacy. That is the belief that I can do the thing that's in front of me. Self-efficacy isn't something that you can just expect to magic out of thin air. Self-efficacy is something that you have to nurture. So, for example, the best indication that you can become Olympic champion is that you've become world champion. The best indication that you become world champion is European champion or Southeast Asia champion. And there are increments along the way. A lot of people will just look at what's in front of them and forget what they've achieved. So it's
That is a really
important.
good point. That is a really, really good point. And thank you for pointing that out as well, because in addition to that, it's a continuum, isn't it? It's not all or nothing. And it's also not all the things that we've forgotten from before or only focused on one very small aspect.
Yeah, a climber takes one step up each
Mm.
time. They don't bound up. They don't just take a magic leap. They take a step from where they are and the next logical step forward. And an athlete nurtures its confidence from everything that they've achieved.
It's a process. It looks like Gordon has a question. And Gordon, I think you're going to need to unmute yourself if you're going to try and ask that question. So could you maybe ask Steve your question?
Hey,
Sure,
Gordon.
sure. I'll just lower my hand here so it doesn't get tired. So maybe two questions. We'll see if I can get them in. One, you had talked about these high goals and expectations as part of this like Olympic bid where the result, it seems, was like fear, threat, resistance. And then you proceeded to talk about like distinctions between low performing and high performing teams. And I'm just curious, with high goals and expectations, is it productive for teams to be experiencing fear and threat and resistance if they are indeed high performing teams? Like, is that fuel for high performing teams? I couldn't make that link myself. Maybe I'll just pause there.
Oh, it's a really interesting one. So we're all hardwired to feel threat and chase reward. And so that's a very important dynamic for us to recognize. some of the best performers that as I've sort of talked about, it's not just about this wild optimism. It's about a really grounded reality of where we are. And if you feel that threat, the high performers do one thing more than worry, is they say, now what am I going to do? And so a goal, there are two distinct versions of a goal. We've got the high up on the mountain, 66 medals, 121 medals, which is what we call a distal goal. It's far out in the distance. It's the top of the summit. But there's also a proximal goal, which is, and what am I going to do today that's in front of me? And so the two have to be complementary. It's whether the crazy goal, the fear one, can overwhelm you into paralysis. That's the distinction. And choosing a sort of a more human, integrated, holistic approach of thinking, let's hear what those fears are. Because as a leader, it's very easy to initiate fear and threat. And then your workforce says, well, I'm not going to bother. I'm just not going to do anything. And that in itself suppresses human function, as opposed to thinking, what am I going to do that can move me forward?
Yeah, and Steve, let me that's an important thing to kind of pay attention to. And Kyle also has a question that's sort of indirectly related to that. He says, in the arena of the Olympics, every marginal gain is desirable, no matter how small. The work world, we also need to consider costs in deciding what changes to make and which don't make sense. What method do you recommend leaders to utilize in making these decisions?
A great question, Kyle. And so there are some very simple ways, decision-making matrices that we use for that. Every marginal gain isn't necessarily desirable, particularly if the gain is costly in terms of time, effort, finding out whether it's going to apply to you. So what we tend to do is divide into a 2x2 matrix here, where we're thinking about return versus the risk return. So what we're looking for is low risk, high return. That's the place that we're gonna spend most of our time. And it's some of the boring stuff. It's about sleeping well, eating well, recovering well. Some of these things that actually lever a lot of human engagement in and recovery and performance. Then you've got high risk, high reward. So it's worth exploring. And that's where you'd put more meticulous research and exploratory. You take time to find out whether something is working or not. And then low risk, low reward. You might still start exploring some of those. High risk, low reward. What you're doing, you shouldn't be there.
Let me ask on behalf of Veheda, hopefully I pronounced your name properly. Being a high performer has some side effects. The most important one is that you are not like other people around you. They start talking about you, that you are different, this not the way of living, do not do this much. You are not living your life. What is the solution especially during COVID times? Sorry, I hope I asked the question properly. Steve, you may have it in your chat box potentially to see if you can see the question.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
Properly.
I think that I haven't got a complete answer to this, I'm afraid. And I think put my hands up from the question as it's written. I'm not sure I can fully satisfy it. Firstly, so what is it that you want to nudge forward, if at all, and how much by? High performance athletes, high performance coaches, support staff, they're driving athletic performance forward. We're driving high performance teams forward. And so my sense is you've got to be kind to yourself at a time like this of transition, that if you're pushing and pushing and pushing, you're probably going to fall short of a lot of expectations. If you have some appetite, do you want to move something forward, then I would suggest, a little bit like Gordon's question, about some small wins. What's the win that you could make that at the end of the day you'd think, that's fantastic. that was one thing that I wanted to tick off, or one thing I wanted to do, or maybe a little bit of a brave list. That's the one thing I wanted to do, and I've achieved it. So small little wins might be a way of doing that. I hope I've caught the essence of that question. I'm sorry if I haven't.
Yeah, hopefully we've addressed that. And I'm going to do one more question before we need to start wrapping up. And Brenda's asking, and I think this is touched also on what you just said. And her question is, what advice do you give a leader with high demands to create time to listen and engage with team members, despite feeling like that is the last thing they have time for?
I would urge you to make time for it. Leaders are ultimately, and I think every single leadership book there is, as I've seen some extensive research on this, is based on Fleischmann's model of management, which is, how do I hold the task in hand and I take the people with me? And this maps to one of our deeply held psychological functions of whether I'm agreeable or not. And so I want to get stuff done, but I've also got to take people with me. And it's not a seesaw. It's not either or. It's not just task at the expense of people. It's not just people at the expense of task. You can do both. And so I would probably, in a very simple summary way of thinking, if I'm being asked to do a lot, I've also got to make sure I'm connecting with the people as to how we're going to be doing this, and that they're in balance and moving forward.
And ultimately, I guess that's the definition of a team, isn't it? The leader is part of that team.
Yeah, absolutely. You're not going to go anywhere fast without a team behind you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your insights. Ritika, I think it's back over to you to do a bit of the wrap up that we have on our agenda there.
Thank you so much, Steve and Emilia, for the interesting discussion, and our audience for those insightful questions. So, before we bid adieu, as promised, there is a surprise for everyone attending our event today. I would like to engage everyone in a fun trivia contest. 3 lucky participants today will have a chance to win Amazon gift cards worth $50 each through answering questions in the trivia contest. What's more exciting, winners will also be rewarded with a complimentary needs assessment coaching service absolutely free from Jalapeno Employee Engagement, and an ebook of How to Support a Champion by Dr. Steve Ingham. Attendees are asked to log into kahoot.it. It's www.kahoot.it and enter the game code 872-5223. You can do this through a different device or the device that you are using in the event. I would repeat the code again. It's 872-5223. You have to go to kahoot.it. I'm going to give another 1 minute for everybody to join the game. If you're interested in playing the game. More seconds before it's time to start the game. I'm repeating the code again. It's 872-5223 at kahoot.it. You'll have to answer the question based on the color code that you'll be seeing on the screen. So let's start our game. All right, let's start the game. What is Jalapeno's website address? You have to be really quick, only 20 seconds. You have to select the color of the answer that you think is the right one. Let's see who has scored it. It's by the name of Jan. What is the name of Steve's best-selling book? Ooh, 16 people have guessed it right. What are the services provided by Jalapeno? Time is running. Where can you find Steve's podcast? Let's see who the winner is. So our first winner is Mary, and our second winner is CES, and our third winner is SS. I don't know the full names, that's all I can see. Congratulations to our winners. You have won a gift card and a complimentary service from Jalapeno, and as promised, an ebook of How to Support a Champion by Steve. Winners are requested to write their email addresses in the chat box privately to me so we can send you your gifts. So don't forget to check your inboxes after the event. For those of you who weren't able to share your questions or share your opinions, please feel free to reach out us at info@jalapenovan.com or Steve at www.supportingchampions.co.uk. Thank you again to everyone who joined us this evening and shared their diverse perspectives, especially Dr. Steve Ingham for this phenomenal session. The conversations were both moving and thought provoking. Lastly, keep an eye on your inbox for the feedback form, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event.